Everyone overlooked the same mistake, except Wolfe. Welcome to Clue Lore. I am your host, Vale. Tell me in the comments where you're tuning in from. Your messages always make this even better. Into the mystery. At 11:15 on a Tuesday morning, Nero Wolfe was in the plant rooms on the roof, where he belonged, and I was in the office below, where I also belonged, though with less enthusiasm. My feet were on my desk. My chair was tilted back at an angle which would have made a nervous insurance man reach for a pencil, and I was reading the sports page with the deep attention that some men reserve for scripture. There was no client in the red leather chair. There was no corpse cooling in the hall. There was no district attorney threatening to revoke Wolfe's license, no millionaire's daughter pleading through tears, and no desperate husband pretending he had come merely for advice. In other words, business was slow. That does not mean the household was idle. Fritz was in the kitchen giving serious thought to sweetbreads. Theodore was upstairs with Wolfe and the orchids, probably being corrected in a tone that could wilt a geranium. I was holding the fort, which mostly meant keeping strangers from getting in and Wolfe from being disturbed. The doorbell rang. I lowered the newspaper 2 inches and looked toward the hall. The bell rang again before I had moved. That was not a good sign. A person who rings twice within 4 seconds is either frightened, rude, or selling something. None of the three is desirable at 11:15. I got up, crossed the hall, and opened the front door. The woman standing there was not selling anything, at least not in the ordinary sense. She was about 35, tall enough to make a short man reconsider his shoes, dressed in a dark blue suit that had not been bought in a hurry. Her hat was small, her gloves were grey, and her face had the careful composure of someone who had spent the taxi ride teaching it not to crack. Her eyes were brown and tired, but not weak. She had a flat leather portfolio under one arm. "Mr. Nero Wolfe?" she asked. "Unavailable. I must see him. That makes 2 of us, occasionally. Your name?" "Margaret Ashby." She said it as if it should mean something. It didn't, though it had a good clean sound and probably looked nice on stationery. "Appointment?" "No." "Then you have made your first mistake of the morning. I was told Mr. Wolfe sometimes accepts clients without appointments. He sometimes accepts truffles from France, too. It depends on the condition." She looked past me into the hall. "This is urgent." "They all are." "This concerns a theft." I shook my head. "The police are downtown. They have men with notebooks and shoes. It is not the kind of theft the police can handle. That sentence has paid our rent more than once. Come in." I admit I was curious. Also, she had not tried to smile at me, flatter me, or push past me. Those are 3 points in any visitor's favor. I took her into the office, gave her the red leather chair, and returned to my desk. She sat upright, not touching the back of the chair, with the portfolio on her lap. I asked whether she wanted coffee. She said no. That lost her half a point. "Mr. Wolfe comes down from the plant rooms at 11:30, I told her. "Until then, you may talk to me. I'm Archie Goodwin. I listen, sort, and occasionally translate human emotion into words Mr. Wolfe can tolerate. I know who you are. That saves time. Who sent you?" "No one." "Then how did you choose us?" "My father mentioned Mr. Wolfe once. Years ago, he said that if truth had been hidden under furniture, behind wallpaper, or inside a man's vanity, Nero Wolfe could find it without leaving his chair. That sounds like your father had met him." "He had. Briefly. Name? Elias Ashby." That one did mean something. Not to my heart, but to the part of my head that keeps track of money, politics, and public scandal. Elias Ashby had been a reform lawyer, with a talent for making powerful men regret breakfast. He had died 2 months earlier, and the newspapers had given him a fine send-off, which is what they do for a man once he can no longer contradict them. "The Elias Ashby?" I asked. "Yes." "Sorry." "Thank you." She said it properly, but she was not there for condolences. I took a notebook from my drawer. "All right, what was stolen?" "My father's last memorandum." That sounds less portable than jewelry. It was 12 pages, typed, with handwritten corrections. He kept it in a locked drawer in his study. "It disappeared 3 nights ago." "Was it valuable?" "Yes." "To whom?" To everyone who wanted my father silent before he died. That was a little theatrical, but she had earned it. Her fingers tightened on the portfolio. I said, "Your father died of pneumonia, according to the papers." "He did. You are not suggesting murder?" "No." It was a quick answer. Too quick, maybe. "What was in the memorandum?" "I don't know all of it, but enough to bring you here." "Yes. My father had been investigating the Meridian Charitable Trust. Officially, it funds hospitals, scholarships, public housing studies, civic improvements. Unofficially, he believed it had become a machine for buying influence." "Buying whom?" "Judges, commissioners, zoning boards, newspaper editors, men who prefer donations to bribes because the receipt looks cleaner." "I wrote Meridian Charitable Trust. And your father wrote a memorandum proving it." "He said he was close. The memorandum was to be delivered to 5 people this Friday." "Which 5? She opened the portfolio and took out a folded sheet. "Arthur Clegg, chairman of Meridian. Dr. Simon Bell, administrator of the Ashby Foundation. Lydia Crane, my father's former secretary. Victor Lorne, a political consultant. And myself." Interesting guest list. It was not a guest list. It was a warning. "From a dead man?" "My father arranged it before he died. He left instructions with Mr. Hadley, his attorney. The memorandum was to be copied and delivered 3 months after his death, unless I stopped it." "You stopped it?" "No, someone else did." The office was quiet, except for the soft city noise beyond the windows. I glanced at the clock. 11:24. Wolfe would be descending in 6 minutes, carrying with him the mood of a man forced to re-enter civilization. I said, "Why not tell the attorney?" I did. "Mr. Hadley claims the copy in his safe is also missing." That made me put the pencil down. "Both copies?" "Yes." "Same night?" "Apparently." "Apparently. Mr. Hadley discovered his loss yesterday morning. I discovered mine Sunday." "You said your father kept it in his study." "He did. After his death, I kept the house exactly as it was. His desk, his books, even his blotter. And the drawer was locked." "Yes." "Broken?" "No." "Who had keys?" "I did. Mr. Hadley had one. Lydia Crane may have had one years ago, though she denies keeping it." "Who knew the memorandum was there?" "My father, Mr. Hadley, possibly Lydia, possibly Dr. Bell." "And the other 2? "They knew of its existence, not its location." "Who was in the house Sunday?" She looked away for the first time, toward the globe near Wolfe's desk, as if Asia had suddenly become relevant. "There was a dinner," she said. "Ah, my father had requested in his will that, 2 months after his burial, certain associates be invited to the house. It was not a memorial, more like a final courtesy. I obeyed." "And the certain associates were?" "The same 5, except my father, of course, and including Mr. Hadley." "So Clegg, Bell, Crane, Lorne, Hadley, and you?" "Yes." "Servants?" "Our cook, Mrs. Vale, a maid hired for the evening. No one else. And after dinner, somebody lifted the memorandum." "I believe so." "You believe so because?" "Because before dinner, the drawer was locked, and the memorandum was inside. After everyone left, the drawer was locked, and the memorandum was gone." I leaned back. "That takes talent. It takes access, or preparation. What do you want Wolfe to do? Find out who stole it, and then recover it if possible. If not, prove who took it. For the police, for myself, that answer had weight. Not legal weight, maybe, but human weight. She was not merely guarding a document. She was guarding the last active gesture of a dead father, and someone had reached into his desk and erased it. The sound of the elevator came from the hall. At 11:30 exactly, Nero Wolfe entered. He had changed from the yellow shirt he wore in the plant rooms into one of his office shirts, which was also yellow but somehow more official. His large head was tilted slightly back, his eyes half closed, and his lips arranged in the line that meant the world had disappointed him again by continuing to exist. He crossed to his chair behind the desk, lowered himself into it with care, and looked at me. I said, "Miss Margaret Ashby, daughter of Elias Ashby, Missing memorandum. Possible theft. No corpse yet. Wolfe's eyes moved to her. He inclined his head 1/8 of an inch. Madam, Mr. Wolfe, you have disturbed my morning. I'm sorry. That is not a remedy. Her chin lifted slightly. I am prepared to pay for one. Wolfe's eyes opened a fraction more. Mr. Goodwin will inform you that I do not sell remedies. I sell effort, when sufficiently provoked. I believe this case will provoke you, indeed. My father once said you dislike two things above all others: bad food and bad reasoning. He understated it. Then you will dislike this. Everyone involved has a reason to lie, but only one of them made a mistake. Wolfe's brows moved. Not much. With Wolfe, a raised brow is a trumpet blast. What mistake? I don't know, but I know there was one. He closed his eyes. Pfui. That usually ends a conversation. Miss Ashby did not move. I put in, the missing item is Elias Ashby's final memorandum on the Meridian Charitable Trust. One copy gone from his study. One copy gone from his attorney's safe. 5 interested parties. Dinner Sunday night. Locked drawer not forced. Wolfe opened his eyes again. The police? No. Why? Miss Ashby answered. Because the memorandum may contain accusations my father had not fully proved. If I go to the police and fail, I destroy reputations without justice. If I do nothing, I betray him. Wolfe regarded her for 5 full seconds. That is a long time when you are being regarded by Nero Wolfe. A weaker visitor might have rearranged her gloves or confessed to something. You speak of justice, he said. Most people mean revenge when they use that word under strain. I want the truth. Truth is often merely revenge with better manners. Then I want that. I nearly smiled, but Wolfe did not. He leaned back. You said everyone involved has reason to lie. Name them. She did. Arthur Clegg, chairman of Meridian, wealthy, polished, and allergic to exposure. Dr. Simon Bell, old family friend and administrator of the Ashby Foundation, a man whose loyalty had become too profitable. Lydia Crane, the former secretary who knew Elias Ashby's habits better than his daughter did. Victor Lorne, political consultant, fixer, and collector of private weaknesses. Henry Hadley, the lawyer, trusted for 30 years, and therefore in the best possible position to betray. As she spoke, Wolfe's eyes lowered until they seemed shut. That did not mean he was asleep. I have seen him hear a comma. When she finished, he said, You have not mentioned your own motive. My motive? If the memorandum damages the foundation, your inheritance may suffer. My father left me enough. No one is left enough if appetite is large. My appetite is not. That remains to be seen. Color touched her cheeks, but she kept her voice steady. I came here voluntarily, Mr. Wolfe. So do many liars. It saves them the trouble of being fetched. I gave her credit. She did not appeal to me. She did not protest. She looked straight at Wolfe and said, Will you take the case? No. She blinked. I did too, though I should have known better. Wolfe continued, Not as stated. I will not hunt a paper through the pockets of scoundrels on behalf of sentiment. If the document exists, it has either been destroyed, hidden, copied, or used. If destroyed, recovery is impossible. If hidden, discovery depends on luck. If copied, recovery is irrelevant. If used, the use will reveal the user. Miss Ashby stood slowly. Then I have wasted your time. Yes, but not entirely. She stopped. Wolfe folded his hands over his middle. I will accept a different commission. I will learn what your father knew, who feared it, and why 2 locked repositories yielded their contents without violence. The memorandum is not the object. The act is. The act? The theft, madam. A paper is paper. A theft is a statement. Someone has spoken. I will translate. For the first time, something in her face loosened. Not relief exactly. More like a woman hearing a door unlocked in a dark hall. What is your fee? Wolfe named it. She did not faint, bargain, or ask whether that included expenses. She opened her handbag and wrote a check. Wolfe glanced at it, then at me. Archie. Receipt. I got the receipt book. Miss Ashby handed me the check. Her hand was steady now. As she turned to go, Wolfe said, "One moment. At the dinner Sunday evening, was anything served which had been especially favored by your father?" She looked surprised. "Yes. Quail with black currant sauce. It was his favorite." Wolfe's lips tightened. "Who chose the menu?" "I did." "Who knew it had been his favorite?" "All of them, I suppose." "Not good enough. Find out." "I don't understand." "No. That is why you came." She stared at him, then nodded once and left with me to the door. When I returned, Wolfe had his eyes closed and his fingers were making small circles on the arm of his chair. I said, "You took that fast." "I took nothing fast." "You said no, then yes. For you, that's a sprint." He grunted. "What hooked you? The missing copy from Hadley's safe?" "No." "The locked drawer?" "No." "The 5 suspects?" "No." "The Quail?" His eyes opened. "Possibly." I sat down. "You think the menu matters?" "I think Miss Ashby came here to recover a document. She should have come to ask why a dead man arranged a dinner for people who had reason to fear him." "That's not the same question." "No, it is the question everyone missed." He reached for the beer button, then thought better of it, because it was still morning, and Fritz had rules that even Wolfe occasionally respected. "Archie." "Yes, sir." "You will see Miss Ashby this afternoon. You will inspect the study, speak with the servants, and obtain full descriptions of the guests' movements after dinner. You will also learn who sat where, who left the table, who touched the desk, who mentioned the memorandum, and who praised the Quail." "The Quail again?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because vanity is more reliable than fingerprints." I wrote that down, not because I understood it, but because with Wolfe, that is often the first step. He closed his eyes again. "And Archie." "Yes?" "Do not permit anyone to bring anything from that house into this one without my approval." That made me look up. "You expect trouble here?" "I expect stupidity." "Trouble is merely stupidity with momentum." I put my notebook in my pocket. Outside, New York was having another ordinary day, which meant several million people were lying, buying, selling, regretting, eating badly, and blocking traffic. Inside the brownstone, silence settled back over the office, but it was not the same silence as before. A dead man had invited his enemies to dinner. A paper had vanished from a locked drawer, and Nero Wolfe, who hated leaving his chair almost as much as he hated bad grammar, had decided that the theft was not the crime. At 2:15 that afternoon, I was standing on the sidewalk in front of the Ashby house on East 63rd, looking at a brownstone that had money without shouting about it. Some houses in New York wear wealth the way a fat man wears a diamond stick pin. This one kept its hands in its pockets. The steps were clean, the brass was polished, the curtains were not trying to impress anyone, and the windows looked as if they had seen lawyers come and go for 40 years without once being surprised. Margaret Ashby opened the door herself. She had changed from the blue suit into a gray dress, but the same controlled face was on duty. She said, "Mr. Goodwin," and stepped aside. "Miss Ashby, nice place to hide a memorandum. It failed. That makes it interesting." She led me through a hall that smelled faintly of beeswax and old books. Wolfe would have approved of the smell and disapproved of the stairs. The study was at the rear, looking onto a small garden boxed in by brick walls. Elias Ashby's desk stood near the windows, a heavy mahogany affair, with legs thick enough to support municipal corruption. Behind it were shelves from floor to ceiling, law books, histories, reports, bound pamphlets, and enough blue-backed documents to frighten an alderman. "The drawer?" I asked. She pointed to the right pedestal. "The lower one." I knelt and examined it. The lock was good, but not miraculous. There were no fresh scratches around it, no signs of a jimmy, no bent brass. I opened and shut it twice. The action was smooth. Inside were folders, stationery, sealing wax, 2 pencils sharpened to a point, and an envelope containing old theater tickets. No memorandum, which proved only that thieves are sometimes thorough. Who opened it after dinner? I did, at about 11:30. Everyone had gone. And before dinner, at 6. I checked because Mr. Hadley asked whether I was certain it was still there. That made me turn my head. He asked that before dinner. Yes. Why? He said that since the delivery date was approaching, we should be careful. Thoughtful man. He has been our attorney since before I was born. That doesn't prevent thoughtfulness. It only makes it expensive. She almost smiled, then remembered she had other duties. I asked for the evening as if I were a waiter taking an order, beginning to end. Dinner had been called at 8. Cocktails in the drawing room at 7:30. 6 people present. Margaret, Arthur Clegg, Dr. Simon Bell, Lydia Crane, Victor Lorne, and Henry Hadley. The quail with blackcurrant sauce had been served after a clear soup and before a salad. Dessert had been pear tart. Coffee in the library at 9:30. Departure between 10:40 and 11, except Hadley, who had remained 10 minutes longer to discuss estate details. That gives him privacy, I said. It gives him opportunity, she said stiffly. It does not give him guilt. I sell neither guilt nor innocence. I collect movements. She gave me the seating arrangement. Clegg on her right, Bell on her left, Lydia Crane opposite, Lorne beside Lydia, Hadley at the end nearest the door. There had been 2 interruptions. Arthur Clegg left the table after the quail and was gone 4 minutes. He said he had made a telephone call. Lydia Crane left before dessert to repair a torn glove. Victor Lorne wandered into the hall during coffee and looked at the portraits. Dr. Bell asked to see the garden after dinner and was shown the rear door by Mrs. Vale. Hadley had his 10 private minutes. In other words, the only person who had not conveniently left the group was Margaret Ashby, and clients are not thereby purified. Who praised the quail? I asked. She stared at me. You're serious. Never about quail, always about instructions. Mr. Clegg said the sauce was remarkable. Dr. Bell said my father would have approved. Miss Crane said it was exactly as Mrs. Ashby used to serve it. Mr. Lorne hardly ate. Mr. Hadley said nothing about it. Who knew your father's favorite? All of them could have known, but Miss Crane knew precisely. She arranged dinners for him for years. Mrs. Ashby? My mother. She died 12 years ago. I wrote that down. Dead people have a habit of remaining involved. Mrs. Vale, the cook, came in wearing a black dress and the expression of a woman who had seen employers come and go and found them all underseasoned. She had worked for the Ashbys 22 years. She confirmed the menu, the guests, and the interruptions. She had seen Clegg use the telephone in the hall, or at least stand near it with the receiver in his hand. She had seen Lydia Crane go upstairs, though not which room she entered. She had seen Dr. Bell at the garden door, looking not at the garden, but back toward the study passage. She had seen Victor Lorne in the hall, examining a portrait of Elias Ashby's father. Hadley she had not watched, because lawyers, in her opinion, moved quietly, even when innocent. What about the hired maid? I asked. Girl named Nora. Agency center. She broke a saucer and cried. Did she go near the study? No. Did anyone? Mrs. Vale looked at Margaret, then at me. Not while I saw. That phrase is a nice safe harbor. I let it float. The maid Nora had already returned to the agency, which gave me a future errand. Before leaving, I examined the garden door, the study windows, the hall telephone, and the upstairs cloakroom where Lydia Crane had supposedly repaired her glove. In the cloakroom wastebasket, I found a small piece of gray thread, which might have come from a glove, a dress, a mouse, or an imagination. I put it in an envelope because Wolfe likes objects better when they are small enough to disapprove of. At 4:30, I had my first suspect in person. Arthur Clegg received me in his Meridian office, which occupied a high floor on Madison Avenue and had windows large enough to make a taxpayer feel small. He was 50, handsome in the carved way, with silver at his temples, and a smile that had learned to arrive before the truth. Mr. Goodwin, he said, offering a hand. I wondered when Miss Ashby would hire someone. You expected it. I expected anxiety. Margaret has always inherited her father's suspicions without his discipline. Meaning the memorandum was fantasy. Meaning Elias saw conspiracy where others saw civic cooperation. Did you make a phone call during dinner Sunday? I did. To whom? My office. At 9 in the evening on Sunday. I work when necessary. Who answered? He smiled. My private exchange records can confirm it. That was not an answer. No, it was a boundary. I liked him less, which is not evidence but saves time. Did you know the memorandum was in the study? No. Did you want it? I wanted Elias Ashby to stop poisoning public work with private grudges. Since he is dead, my wishes have become philosophical. He said it smoothly, but when I mentioned black currant sauce, his right hand, lying on the desk, curled once and opened again. The quail was excellent, he said. Is that now evidence? In some kitchens, yes. From Clegg, I went to Lydia Crane, who lived in a narrow apartment on West 10th. She was 46, thin, neat, and pale, with eyes like locked drawers. She had been Elias Ashby's secretary for 17 years and had left 6 months before his death. Dismissed? I asked. Resigned. Why? Mr. Ashby became difficult. People say that about men who stop being useful. She gave me a long look. People say many things when they have not emptied a dying man's ashtrays. She admitted leaving the table. Yes, she had torn her glove. Yes, she had gone upstairs. No, she had not entered the study. Yes, she had known the memorandum existed. No, she had not taken it. When I asked about the quail, she turned her face toward the window. Mrs. Ashby made it for him on the night he decided to ruin Judge Kettering, she said. That was new. Ruin how? Expose. Elias preferred clean verbs for dirty results. And the Sunday dinner copied that night. Of course it did. Who would know that? She looked back at me. Anyone who had read his private dinner book. His what? She regretted it instantly. Not visibly enough for a jury, but enough for me. Mr. Ashby kept notes, she said. Menus, guests, subjects discussed. A habit. Where? In the study, on the second shelf beside the French dictionaries. I did not ask why Margaret had not mentioned it. I merely stood, thanked her, and left her sitting very straight in her little room with her hands folded and her mouth shut. At 6:10, I was back at the brownstone. Wolfe was in the office with a glass of beer, which meant civilization had been restored to a tolerable minimum. I gave him the thread, the movements, the telephone boundary, Mrs. Vale's observations, and Lydia Crane's private dinner book. At that, Wolfe opened his eyes. Miss Ashby omitted it. Either omitted or didn't know. Find out. I was hoping to eat first. You will, after you telephone Miss Ashby. I phoned. Margaret answered on the second ring. When I asked about the dinner book, there was a silence long enough to grow moss. I don't know of any such book, she said. Look on the second shelf beside the French dictionaries. She left the phone. Wolfe watched me without blinking. 2 minutes passed. Then 3. When she returned, her voice had changed. It is gone, she said. I covered the mouthpiece and told Wolfe. He put down his glass carefully. Tell her to touch nothing. We are coming. We? He scowled. Confound it. I misspoke. You are going. That was better for the furniture, but not for the case. I told Margaret and hung up. Wolfe leaned back and shut his eyes. The memorandum was not enough, he murmured. What does that mean? It means, Archie, that someone stole the accusation and then remembered the appetite. The quail? The record of the quail. The past has become dangerous. He opened his eyes. Bring the book if it exists elsewhere. Bring Miss Ashby if necessary. And Archie, yes? This time, look not at the locked drawer. Look at the shelves. So I took my hat again. A man may complain about Wolfe's immobility, but there are moments when his chair seems to move the whole city. By 7 o'clock I was back on East 63rd, and the Ashby study no longer looked merely robbed. It looked edited. Margaret Ashby met me in the hall, with the face of a woman who had just discovered that a house can betray you without moving an inch. I have touched nothing, she said. That puts you ahead of most citizens. She led me again to the study. The lamps were on now, throwing a yellow shine over the mahogany desk and the bookshelves, and the garden windows had gone black with evening. In daylight, the room had looked dignified. At night, it looked secretive. Rooms are like people that way. After dark, they stop pretending. The The second shelf beside the French dictionaries had a gap, not a large one, about the width of a ledger, maybe 2 inches thick. The surrounding books had not sagged into the space yet, which meant the removal was recent, or the books were too well bred to lean. "That is where it was?" I asked. "I suppose so. I never knew it existed." Miss Crane knew. Miss Crane knew many things I did not. There was no warmth in that sentence. I filed it. I took the books down on either side of the gap. On the left was a French-English legal dictionary with a cracked spine. On the right, a volume of Montaigne in French, unread by me, and probably by half the people who display him. There was dust along the shelf, except where the missing book had stood. The dust mark was clean and rectangular. Whoever took it had not done so months ago. "Who has been in here since Sunday night?" I asked. "Myself, Mrs. Vale, Mr. Hadley yesterday morning, Dr. Bell this afternoon." That one deserved a turn of the head. "Dr. Bell?" He came to ask whether I had reconsidered telling him what was in the memorandum. Friendly. He said the Ashby Foundation might be endangered if the matter became public. Was he alone in the study? For perhaps 2 minutes, I was called to the telephone. By whom? I don't know. When I answered, there was no one. That was either very useful or very cheap. Often the two travel together. I went to the desk and stood behind it, looking at the room, as Elias Ashby had probably looked at it. Shelves ahead, door to the right, garden behind, fireplace to the left. If a man had kept a dinner book near the French dictionaries, it was not hidden, it was placed. There is a difference. Hidden things are for secrecy, placed things are for habit. "Tell me about Dr. Bell," I said. "He was my father's friend." "Was?" "He still says he is. People cling to titles after the office is closed. He runs the Ashby Foundation. My father trusted him with grants, endowments, hospital work, all of it, and then stopped." She hesitated. "He had begun asking questions. About Meridian, about overlaps, the same consultants, the same committees, the same public reports. My father thought Dr. Bell was allowing foundation money to be used as cover for Meridian influence. And Dr. Bell knew it. He knew my father was displeased. I walked to the garden windows. The latch was locked. Outside, the little brick-walled garden sat under a slice of city sky, with a stone bench, 2 bare shrubs, and a narrow path. Not much of a garden, but enough for a man to stand in and pretend he had escaped New York. Sunday night, Dr. Bell asked to see the garden. Yes. Why? He said he remembered my mother's roses. In February? She had winter plantings too. Uh-huh. I opened the rear door and stepped out. Cold air came up and pinched my ears. The garden path ran 5 yards to a side gate set into the brick wall. The gate was locked from the inside with a sliding bolt. I bent and looked at it. Clean metal, no scratch, no sign of use. On the ground near the bench was a flattened cigarette end, damp but recognizable. I picked it up with a handkerchief. "Do you smoke?" I asked Margaret when I came back in. "No." "Mrs. Vale?" "No." "Guests?" "Mr. Lorne does, constantly. Mr. Clegg sometimes. Dr. Bell never. Mr. Hadley smokes cigars." The cigarette was Turkish, gold-tipped, expensive and vain. I liked Victor Lorne for it. A suspect who leaves his habits around is considerate. I was still holding it when the doorbell rang. Margaret stiffened. I'm expecting no one. That's how visitors get interesting. Mrs. Vale answered, and a moment later, a man came into the study without waiting to be invited. He was short, square, and beautifully dressed, with black hair brushed flat, and a mouth made for confidential smiles. I knew him from newspaper photographs. Victor Lorne always appeared half a step behind candidates, widows, governors, and men indicted later. "Margaret," he said, "I came as soon as I heard." "Heard what?" "That Goodwin was here again." His eyes flicked to me. Nero Wolfe moves quickly when properly fed. "Mr. Wolfe didn't come," I said. "He sent his appetite in spirit." Lorne smiled. "I see. And now we are all to be measured." "Only where you bulge," Margaret said. "Victor, why are you here?" "To keep you from making a ruinous mistake. Arthur Clegg is furious. Dr. Bell is alarmed. Hadley is offended. Lydia is talking. You have stirred a pot your father left covered for a reason. My father wanted it uncovered. Your father, Lorne said softly, wanted many things when anger sat with him. That hit her. Not hard enough to knock her down, but enough to show he knew where the ribs were. I said, "Did you come Sunday night through the garden?" He looked at me. No. Did you smoke there? No. Do you smoke Turkish cigarettes? Yes. I held up the wet remnant. His smile remained, but his eyes didn't. Then evidently I dropped one. Where? In the garden, if you found it there. You just said you weren't in the garden. I said I did not come through it. I stepped out during coffee. The room was warm. Alone? For the blessed purpose of being so. Did you see Dr. Bell? No. Did you see anyone near the study windows? No. He turned back to Margaret. This is exactly what I mean. A detective takes a cigarette, a pause, an old dinner, and makes a melodrama. Your father had enemies because he enjoyed having them. Do not inherit his wars. She was pale now. Did you take the dinner book? For the first time, he stopped performing. What dinner book? The answer came too fast, but not false enough. There is a difference between a man surprised and a man pretending surprise. Lorne looked surprised and annoyed by it. I said, Elias Ashby kept a private dinner record. It has vanished. Lorne's gaze moved to the shelf gap. Then he did something small. He looked not at the desk, not at Margaret, but at the portrait over the fireplace. Elias Ashby's portrait. The old man in oil had white hair, sharp eyes, and the expression of a judge who had not enjoyed the defense. "Good God!" Lorne said. Margaret heard the change. "You know something?" "No. Victor." He took out a silver cigarette case, thought better of it, and put it back. If such a book exists, and if Elias wrote in it what he sometimes said after wine, there are private matters in it. Not crimes, not corruption. Private matters. Whose? He gave me a look with no smile in it. People still alive. That narrows Manhattan. The doorbell rang again. This time Margaret did not move. Mrs. Vale came to the study door after a minute, looking as if she had found a snake in the umbrella stand. "Miss Margaret," she said, "Mr. Hadley is here." Henry Hadley entered behind her, tall, dry and grey, with a lawyer's face, long practice at grief, caution and invoices. His hat was in his hand. His eyes went to Lorne, then to me, then to the shelf. "I was afraid of this," he said. It was a fine line. It could mean anything, and therefore probably did. "Afraid of what?" I asked. He ignored me and spoke to Margaret. "You should not have involved Wolfe. You told me to be careful. I am being careful. No, you are being public." "In my own study? With that man in it?" He nodded at me. I grinned. "I'm housebroken." Hadley did not appreciate it. "This matter concerns confidential papers belonging to the estate of Elias Ashby." "Then you admit the dinner book existed," I said. His lips tightened. "I admit nothing to you." "That's all right. You admitted enough to the room," Lorne said. "Henry, did you take it?" Hadley turned on him. "Don't be a fool." "Too late," I said. "Everybody has started." Margaret's voice cut through them. "I want both of you to leave." Neither moved. That was when I noticed the desk blotter. I had looked at it earlier in the afternoon. Green leather, worn at the edges, with a brass rail at the top. Now the lower right corner was not lying flat. It had been lifted and put back carelessly. I crossed to it and raised it. Underneath was a folded slip of paper. Margaret made a sound. Lorne stepped forward. Hadley said, "Don't touch that." I touched it. The paper was plain, torn from a small notebook. On it, in black ink, were 6 words. "Ask who remembered the sauce." I read it twice, though once was enough. Then I folded it again, put it in my wallet, and said, "Gentlemen, Miss Ashby is right. You're leaving." Hadley's face had gone the color of old paste. Lorne was staring at the portrait again. Margaret looked not frightened now, but angry, and anger suited her better than grief. I escorted the two visitors to the front door. Hadley went first, stiff as a legal brief. Lorne paused on the threshold. "Goodwin," he said quietly, "tell Wolfe he is not the only man who knows how to arrange a room. I'll tell him. He likes compliments from amateurs." When I returned to the study, Margaret was standing by the desk. "That note," she said, "was it my father's hand?" "No." "Then whose?" "I don't know. But I had a suspicion, and it had nothing to do with handwriting." At 9 o'clock I was back in Wolfe's office. He had finished dinner and was looking as peaceful as a loaded cannon. I gave him the cigarette, the missing book, Dr. Bell's visit, Lorne's contradiction, Hadley's arrival, and the note. When I read the 6 words aloud, Wolfe did not move. Then he said, "Satisfactory. Satisfactory. Somebody got into that study after I left." "Yes. And left us a note." "Yes. And you call that satisfactory?" "It confirms that the thief is afraid not of what Ashby wrote, but of what Ashby remembered. About sauce. About an evening," Wolfe said. "A dinner. A vanity. A mistake." He opened his eyes. "Tomorrow, Archie, you will bring me Lydia Crane." The next morning began with rain, which is New York's way of reminding pedestrians that sidewalks are only a courtesy. At 9:30 I was under an umbrella on West 10th Street, ringing Lydia Crane's bell and thinking that Nero Wolfe had arranged my day in the usual democratic manner. He had decided, and I had obeyed. Lydia took her time opening the door. When she did, she was dressed for going out. Black coat buttoned to the throat, hat pinned low, gloves in one hand, handbag in the other. Her face showed no surprise at seeing me. That was interesting. Most people are surprised by me at their door before breakfast, unless they are expecting either trouble or flowers. "Mr. Goodwin," she said. "Miss Crane, Wolfe wants to see you." "I have no desire to see Mr. Wolfe. That puts you in a large and distinguished group. He still wants to see you. I have an appointment. So do I. With you. Mine has a larger man behind it." She looked past me at the wet street, then stepped back. 5 minutes. I entered a room that had been arranged by someone who disliked waste, dust, and impulse. There was a desk by the window, a typewriter covered with a cloth, 3 straight chairs, and a shelf of account books. No flowers, no soft cushions. If the room had ever laughed, it had apologized afterward. "Where were you going?" I asked. "To the public library." "For pleasure? For work?" "What work?" "I index private papers. Retired men discover late in life that their letters are history. Their widows discover later that history pays by the box." "Did Elias Ashby's papers pay?" She turned. "Mr. Ashby paid salaries, not wages." "That sounds like affection wearing armor." She drew on one glove carefully. "You said Mr. Wolfe wants to see me. Why?" "He has questions about a dinner, a book, and black currant sauce." At the sauce she stopped pulling the glove. "Just for a beat, but enough." "You told me yesterday," I said, "that Mrs. Ashby served quail with black currant sauce the night Elias decided to expose Judge Kettering. Wolfe thinks that matters. Mr. Wolfe thinks sitting still matters. It has worked for him." She went to the window and looked out. Rain streaked the glass, drawing lines over her reflection. "Elias used dinners as instruments. Men came thinking they would eat well and leave admired. Instead, he watched them. He believed appetite loosened judgment." "Did it?" "Often." "What happened at the Kettering dinner?" She was silent long enough for me to hear a bus pass outside and a radiator knock in the wall. "Judge Kettering accepted gifts through a hospital committee," she said at last. "Elias invited him, fed him his favorite dishes, poured his favorite wine, and allowed him to boast. By midnight, Elias knew where to look. By spring, Kettering was finished. And he wrote it in the dinner book. He wrote everything in that book. Guests, menu, table talk, slips, vanities, lies that grew careless over coffee. Who knew that? I did. Mr. Hadley did. Dr. Bell probably did. Mrs. Ashby knew while she lived. Arthur Clegg? Not unless Elias told him. Victor Lorne? She turned from the window. Victor knew more than he should. You don't like him. I dislike men who convert secrets into currency. That's nearly a profession in this town. He made it an art. I sat on one of the straight chairs and regretted it immediately. Miss Crane, why did you leave Ashby's employment? She answered too promptly. I resigned because his illness made him unjust. What did he accuse you of? Her eyes sharpened. Who said he accused me? You did, by walking around the hole. She removed the glove she had just put on and laid it on the desk. He believed I had shown Victor Lorne a private letter. Had you? No. Had Lorne seen it? Yes. Then how? I don't know. That was the answer Elias disliked. That was the answer he refused. What was in the letter? She pressed her lips together. I waited. Waiting is one of the cheaper tools in our trade, and often the most effective if you can keep from fidgeting. I can, sometimes. It concerned Dr. Bell, she said, and a grant routed through the Ashby Foundation to a housing survey that never existed. Meridian money? Not directly. That was the trick. The foundation paid for clean paper. Meridian used the paper to justify dirty decisions. Who wrote the letter? Elias. To Henry Hadley. He instructed him to prepare a legal path for removing Bell from the foundation. And Lorne learned it. Yes. What did Lorne do with it? Dr. Bell came the next day and resigned from 2 committees before Elias could remove him. Quietly, gracefully, saved face, saved worse. And Elias blamed you. He trusted habits more than people. I handled the files. Therefore I had betrayed him. Hadley had the letter too. She looked down at her hands. Yes, there it was. Not a confession, but a direction. Hadley again, dry and careful, standing near locked things. Will you come? I asked. To Mr. Wolfe. Yes. Why should I? Because someone stole the dinner book after you mentioned it to me. That makes you either useful or endangered. Wolfe prefers useful. She considered that. And you. I prefer cooperative. It saves shoe leather. She put on her coat properly and came. At the brownstone, Fritz took her coat with his best neutral expression, which is warmer than most men's smiles. Wolfe was in the office, behind his desk, with his eyes open and his lips pushed out. That meant he had been waiting and resented the fact that time had obeyed him too slowly. Lydia Crane sat in the red leather chair. She did not shrink in it. Some people do. It has received murderers, widows, millionaires, cowards, and once a tenor who cried before Wolfe said hello. Lydia sat straight, hands folded, eyes on Wolfe. He said, You were secretary to Elias Ashby for 17 years. Yes. You kept his papers. I managed them. You knew of the dinner book. Yes. Why did you not inform Miss Ashby of it after his death? She did not ask. Wolfe's head moved 1/16 of an inch. Unsatisfactory. It is true. Truth may be insufficient. Try again. Her nostrils moved. Elias Ashby's dinner book was not merely domestic. It contained remarks made in confidence, some cruel, some compromising, some irrelevant but damaging. I thought it kinder to leave it where it was. Kind to whom? To the living. Bah! Charity is frequently cowardice with gloves on. She flushed. Mr. Wolfe, I have no obligation to expose private foolishness because a dead man enjoyed recording it. Nor have you the right to conceal evidence of knavery. I did not know it was evidence. Then why are you afraid? That landed. She looked at me, then back at Wolfe. I am not afraid. No. You are experienced at appearing not afraid. It is not the same thing. Wolfe leaned back. You will tell me the full significance of the quail with black currant sauce. I told Mr. Goodwin. You told him an anecdote. I require the fact beneath it. She shut her eyes briefly. When she opened them, the room seemed to have become smaller. The quail was Mrs. Ashby's dish, she said. Elias disliked sentiment, but he worshipped pattern. When he served that dish, it meant he intended to reproduce a previous evening. Same food, same seating if possible, same rhythm. He believed men repeated themselves under repeated conditions. Good, Wolfe said. At Sunday's dinner, whose former evening was being reproduced? I don't know. You suspect. Yes. Speak. She swallowed. There was a dinner 8 years ago. Arthur Clegg, Dr. Bell, Victor Lorne, Henry Hadley, and Mrs. Ashby were present. I was not at the table, but I handled the arrangements. Quail, with black currant sauce, pear tart, coffee in the library. Purpose? Meridian had not yet become public. It was being organized. Elias was invited to lend his name. He refused. That night, he saw something. I don't know what. Afterward, he told Mrs. Ashby. One of them made a mistake, and the others missed it because they were too pleased with themselves. My scalp gave a small professional tingle. Wolfe's eyes had narrowed. Exact words? As I remember them. Did he write them? In the dinner book, I assume. And on Sunday he recreated that dinner to reveal the same mistake. I believe so. But he died before it could be completed. Yes. Wolfe closed his eyes. Who chose the seating 8 years ago? Mrs. Ashby. And Sunday? Miss Ashby. From instructions? I don't know, I said. Margaret told me she chose the menu. Wolfe opened his eyes. Not the seating. Archie, telephone her. I reached for the phone, but before I touched it, the doorbell rang. Fritz appeared in the office doorway a moment later, carrying a small brown parcel wrapped in butcher paper and tied with twine. It was left at the door, sir, he said. A boy rang and ran. Wolfe looked at the parcel as if it were a cockroach on a dinner plate. Do not put it on my desk. Fritz froze. I got up, took the parcel, and set it on my own desk. It was light, no ticking, no smell of almonds, no stain. The address was typed. Mr. Nero Wolfe, West 35th Street. I cut the twine and opened it. Inside was a small glass jar. The label read, Black Currant Preserve. The jar was empty except for a folded strip of paper. I used tweezers from my drawer and pulled it out. The message was typed in capital letters. Let dead men digest. Lydia Crane made a little sound, not quite a gasp. Wolfe did not move. His face had gone still in the way that meant rage had arrived and found a chair. I said, Cute. No, Wolfe said. Impertinent. With Wolfe, that was worse. He turned to Lydia. Miss Crane, you will remain here until Mr. Goodwin returns. Returns from where? Wolfe's eyes came to me. Archie, bring Saul Panzer, then bring Miss Ashby. Also learn whether Arthur Clegg, Dr. Bell, Victor Lorne, and Henry Hadley can be made available this evening. All of them? All. That's a crowd. It is not yet a crowd. It is a circle. I put on my coat. The rain was still coming down outside, but the weather had lost interest for me. Somebody had sent Wolfe an empty jar and a threat wrapped as a joke. That was poor judgment. Wolfe could endure thieves, liars, blackmailers, and even murderers when business required it, but he had never been tolerant of bad manners. I held the receiver and looked at Lydia Crane, and the room did what rooms do, when everyone in them has heard enough to be afraid, but not enough to know why. It got quiet. Saul's voice came again. Archie, I'm here. Describe her. Middle-aged, thin, dark coat, gray gloves. Paid the boy $2 and told him to run after ringing. He picked her out from a distance. I'm at the drugstore on 9th where she bought the jar. Clerk remembers her. She asked for black currant preserve and seemed annoyed that the jar was full. That's a refined problem. She emptied it in the washroom. Stay with it. I hung up. Wolfe had not asked who it was. He didn't need to. Everyone had heard enough, and those who hadn't had faces and ears. Lydia Crane said, I did not send that jar. Her voice was hard, but something underneath it had begun to tremble. Wolfe regarded her. No. That surprised them. It surprised me too, which happens less often than Wolfe thinks, but more often than I admit. Lorne said, But the woman was meant to be taken for Miss Crane, Wolfe said. Gray gloves are not fingerprints, they are theater. I took the gray thread from my envelope and put it on my desk. Then this was theater too? Yes, crude theater. Miss Crane's gloves yesterday were black. Lydia looked at me. You noticed. I notice women's gloves when they may have robbed a study. Otherwise I try not to pry. Wolfe said, Mr. Lorne, you lied about seeing a woman's hand at the shelves. Lorne smiled slightly. Can you prove that? No. I can demonstrate that the lie was useful only if Miss Crane became the subject of suspicion. That is enough for present purposes, not for legal ones. I am not yet in court, Hadley said. Then what is this performance? Wolfe's eyes shifted to him. A convenience. You have all been brought here because Mr. Ashby's last design has survived the theft of his papers. He arranged a dinner to repeat an earlier dinner. That earlier dinner concerned Meridian. At it, someone made a mistake. Mr. Ashby saw it. He made a note, wrong chair again. Later, dying but still rancorous and still precise, he arranged the repetition. The memorandum was important, but the dinner book was more dangerous. It did not contain merely accusations. It contained context. Clegg snapped. Context is not evidence. No, it is the parent of evidence. Without it, facts are orphans. Dr. Bell sat with his hands folded, soft and white, and watched Wolfe as if he were listening to a sermon he had paid for and disliked. Wolfe turned to Margaret. Your father's instruction sheet for Sunday's seating placed Dr. Bell at your left. Yes. At the dinner 8 years ago, Dr. Bell sat at Mrs. Ashby's left. So Miss Crane said. Indeed. But the phrase on the place card is not wrong place. It is wrong chair. Chairs are not positions at table only. They are also offices, chairmanships, committees, boards. At the first dinner, the Meridian Charitable Trust was being organized. Mr. Clegg became chairman. That was the public fact, but Dr. Bell made a mistake. Bell's expression did not change. Did I? You sat in the wrong chair before dinner, in the drawing room beside Mrs. Ashby, where Arthur Clegg should have been sitting if he were the true principal. You were not overeager for conversation. You were rehearsed in precedence. You moved like the man to whom the evening belonged. Clegg laughed. That is ridiculous. Be quiet, sir. Your laugh is also rehearsed. Clegg flushed, but he shut up. Wolfe continued. Elias Ashby noticed. He later discovered that Meridian's structure, though bearing Mr. Clegg's name, served another master. Its grants, surveys, hospital committees, and civic reports moved through channels familiar to Dr. Bell. The Ashby Foundation was not merely used by Meridian. It was the clean basin in which Meridian washed its hands. Bell said, You have no document. No, you stole it. The room seemed to lean toward him. Bell's eyes widened with admirable sadness. Mr. Wolfe, grief and suspicion have made this grotesque. You stole the memorandum from Miss Ashby's drawer, Sunday night, during the interval after dinner, when you asked to see the garden. Mr. Lorne was outside smoking. He did not see you at the shelves because you were not at the shelves then. You entered through the study door, using a key supplied years before by someone in that household. Lydia Crane said sharply, Not by me. No, by Henry Hadley. Hadley stood up. That is false. Sit down, Wolfe said. Hadley sat. That was one of the evening's better admissions. Wolfe said, Mr. Hadley had the second copy in his safe. It vanished also. A thief cannot take a document from a lawyer's safe without violence, unless the lawyer opens it or lies about its presence. Mr. Hadley did both. He surrendered his copy to Dr. Bell before Sunday because he feared what it contained about himself. Not primary guilt, but complicity. He had helped design legal screens for Meridian while pretending to serve Elias Ashby. Hadley's lips were grey. I protected the foundation. You protected your comfort. Margaret spoke for the first time. And the dinner book? Wolfe turned back to Bell. Dr. Bell took the memorandum, but not the dinner book. He did not know its importance until Mr. Goodwin visited Miss Crane, and she mentioned it. Mr. Goodwin then went to Miss Ashby's house. Later, someone entered the study and removed the book. Not Dr. Bell. He had already been there that afternoon, and failed to take it because he had not yet understood. The person who understood instantly was Mr. Lorne. Lorne's smile disappeared. Wolfe said, You were near the garden. You heard enough of Mr. Goodwin's questions to know the book mattered. You returned, or sent someone, and obtained it. Then, finding in it Ashby's old note about the source and the chair, you contrived to point suspicion toward Miss Crane with grey gloves and a jar. Why? Lorne said nothing. Because the book also exposed you. Not as master, but as broker. You traded secrets among these men. The private letter about Dr. Bell's removal reached Dr. Bell through you, But you had received it from Mr. Hadley, not Miss Crane. Elias Ashby guessed wrong then, and Miss Crane paid for it. That was another mistake everyone missed. Lydia Crane's face changed, not softened. Freed, perhaps, and freedom can look almost violent when it arrives late, Hadley whispered. Victor. Lorne looked at him with contempt. You should have burned more. Wolfe grunted. At last, candor. In fragments. Margaret said, Where is the memorandum? Wolfe looked at Bell. Destroyed, I suppose. Bell's hands remained folded. You suppose a great deal. Yes. I prefer knowing. Archie. I went to the hall and opened the front door. Saul Panzer came in carrying a flat package wrapped in newspaper. He had the quiet satisfaction of a cat that has not merely caught the mouse, but found where the mouse banked. He handed it to me. From Lorne's office. His secretary was nervous. The book was in a locked file. She thought it was campaign material. Lorne came halfway out of his chair. I put a hand on his shoulder, and he sat again. Saul may be small, but with Wolfe in the room, and me within reach, arithmetic improves. I unwrapped the package. It was a leather-bound ledger, old, dark, and worn at the corners. Margaret made a sound when she saw it. Wolfe said, Read the entry. I opened to the marked page. Elias Ashby's handwriting was narrow and controlled. I read aloud where Wolfe pointed. Dinner. Quail with black currant sauce. Bell assumed central chair before announcement. Clegg deferred without noticing. Hadley watched Bell before answering me. Lorne heard too much and spoke too little. Meridian is not Clegg's beast. Bell holds the leash. No one moved. There are silences that are empty and silences that are full. This one was crowded. Wolfe said, There is your father's memorandum in embryo, Miss Ashby. Enough to reopen accounts, enough to direct inquiry, enough to frighten men who thought paper could be killed. Mr. Bell, you will not be arrested tonight unless Miss Ashby insists. But by noon tomorrow, copies of this entry and Mr. Hadley's conduct will be in the hands of persons competent to investigate Meridian. I advise you to spend the interval arranging your conscience, if you still own one. Bell rose slowly. You call this justice? No, Wolfe said. I call it digestion. Justice comes later, often undercooked. Hadley looked old. Clegg looked ruined, though not yet indicted. Lorne looked as if he were already planning a version in which he had been helpful. Lydia Crane sat very still, with 17 years of loyalty and one false accusation settling inside her like dust after a long storm. Margaret took the dinner book from my hands. My father was wrong about Miss Crane. Yes, Wolfe said. That is why the title of infallibility should never be granted to the dead. They cannot decline it. Margaret turned to Lydia. I am sorry. Lydia Crane nodded once. It was not forgiveness. It was receipt. The departures were not cheerful. Saul followed Bell. I saw Hadley to the door and hoped he enjoyed the rain. Clegg left without his umbrella and had to come back for it, which gave me a small but real pleasure. Lorne paused at the threshold as he had before. Wolfe wins because people talk too much, he said. No, I told him. He wins because people talk exactly enough. When the door closed, the brownstone exhaled. Fritz appeared, as if summoned by moral restoration, and announced dinner. Wolfe looked at the clock and made the face of a man who had been kept from civilization by misconduct. Margaret asked, Will the truth be enough? Wolfe looked at her. Enough for what? For my father. Madam, truth is not a tribute to the dead. It is a burden for the living. Your father set a trap with memory, vanity, and appetite. It worked. That does not make him noble. It makes him exact. She accepted that, though not happily. People rarely accept Wolfe's comfort happily, because it usually arrives without sugar. After she had gone, Wolfe and I went to the dining room. There was no quail. Fritz served shad roe with a sauce that deserved better company than the human race. Wolfe ate in silence for 6 minutes, which is his version of prayer. Finally, I said, So the one mistake everyone missed was Bell sitting in the wrong chair. Wolfe swallowed, dabbed his lips and shook his head. No, Archie. That was the mistake Mr. Ashby noticed. The one everyone missed was that Mr. Ashby had made a mistake too. He blamed loyalty and spared convenience. Miss Crane suffered, Mr. Hadley prospered, Mr. Bell grew bold, Mr. Lorne sold what he could. One false conclusion fed 8 years of corruption. I considered that. That's a lot to put on one chair. Chairs are dangerous. Men sit in them and begin to believe they belong there. He returned to his plate. I let him have the last word because it was a good one, and because Fritz had brought more sauce. Outside, New York kept lying in the rain. Inside, the brownstone had its silence back, the proper kind this time, and if the orchids upstairs knew anything about justice, they kept it to themselves.